This is Inspiring Design, where unique innovators come together to share their knowledge, share their insight, and keep us up to date with the latest industry trends. And here's your host, Rushan Senanayake.
Welcome back, guys, and we're actually here with a really special guest today here in Melbourne at the Swinburne Uni DATTA National Conference. We're here with the president of the DATTA Australia. He's also the head of design at Northcote State High School, a leading STEM teacher, and just a wonderful human being all around. I will give a bit of a disclaimer where we both have a pretty strong accent, so you're going to have to listen even more carefully than our previous episodes. So tune in. It should be a lot of good fun. And welcome, Peter.
Thanks for having me.
Can you start off with a little bit of a background on yourself?
Sure. I studied industrial design, or it was called integrated product design when I did it in Glasgow, in Scotland. And that was kind of like a half design, half business degree. So I went travelling after university and went back to Scotland and worked in retail design, so designing shops. Which was fine for a while.
As an industrial designer, or?
Yeah, I kind of helped out wherever they needed me, but designing furniture was meant to be my main job. But I quickly ended up managing projects that no one else wanted to deal with. So I got a lot of experience in that role. But after a few years of that, I was looking for something different, and I moved into kind of tertiary education, just working at colleges and universities in lots of different roles. And when I was working at Dundee College, because we'd moved to the Highlands, I had an opportunity to learn how to teach English as a second language for free.
Oh, wow.
So I took that opportunity. And then we moved to Berlin for 6 months just to use it. And 6 months turned into 4 years. And I loved teaching English. It was mainly to businesses, so IBM, Deutsche Bank, Mercedes-Benz, those types of companies. And after a few years of that, it was time to start thinking about becoming a teacher properly, and maybe teaching something I know more about than English. So I decided to become a design technology teacher, and then we moved to Australia, and that was nearly 10 years ago.
Wow. Seriously, that's an interesting life.
So far, so good.
Yeah, definitely. And I honestly don't want to guess your age, because I think I'm going to get it very wrong, because I would guess mid-30s.
Well, thanks very much. I just turned 40, so I must be I must be doing something right, but I'm not sure what that is.
Must be your background. I don't know,
maybe.
Or the rich experiences. But that's incredible. So with that, what you've somehow always been in design. What exactly about design, like, makes it interesting for you, or like what captures your attention, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a child, I just wanted stuff. So I just drew it and made it, and whatever I couldn't get from my parents, I would go into the garage and make. So that it was always been an early passion of mine, and Lego was a big thing. The skills that I learned at university, I've managed to use them in every role that I've had in some way. Sometimes maybe it's marketing skills, or maybe it's setting up a new business or something like that. But my skills have always been transferable, and I've always felt completely kind of confident in my own abilities in any role that I've landed in. And it hasn't been until I've moved into particularly secondary school education that I've felt like I'm using all of my skills all of the time. So I think that's the most important thing that kind of design has given me.
And I really find it interesting when you mentioned that if you couldn't get something, you went and made it yourself. So it's that ability to create something out of nothing, almost. So
and normally things that I wasn't meant to have out of things that I probably shouldn't have used.
Fair enough. There you go. That's really interesting. So when it comes to teaching design, do you have any preferred methods that you use in your classroom, like compared to maybe back then and or even today?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't teach in the UK. I didn't teach design there, so I didn't learn a different way of doing things. I came to Australia, and I just hoped that they had workshops in schools and tools and equipment and materials that I could get my hands on and help students out with. So when I first arrived, I was just very happy helping kids put nails into wood. I mean, it just seemed like a nice way to make a living. But quickly I realised that wasn't enough for the students. They weren't engaged. It was only a certain type of student that kind of found their place in that part of the school. And normally it was those students that had switched off from the rest of school and didn't feel particularly academic and were maybe a bit lost. So it was good that we were a home for them, and you could kind of take them on and encourage them and maybe empower them to feel like they could do something valuable. But there was a lot of students that just didn't see it as for them. And I really wanted to engage them because I knew there was a lot more that we could do, and I took experiences directly from university. And in fact, the curriculum changes that I brought in the first couple of years at my first school were straight out of university. And I just adapted it for them, and they really took to it, and they loved using CAD and thinking about how they could solve problems bigger than where should I sit my coffee cup, or how am I going to store all these magazines. So when they started thinking about future transport or any sort of gadget or gizmo and drones and robots and all that type of thing, when I started to introduce them to more possibilities, the engagement really grew. And the behaviour got better, and I was having a nicer time, they were having a nicer time. And it's just kind of continued from there.
That's brilliant. And one of the keynotes that you gave at the Queensland State Conference, I think this year, wasn't it?
Yes.
I really enjoyed that because it was about embracing that change, especially with the whole technology coming in and design becoming almost the center of other disciplines, and it's a very big shift from being able to you're the guy who builds the coffee table or the pencil case or something like that. So with that rapid technology change, do you have any things that you do with the school yourself or with the students to stay ahead of the curve almost with the rapid technology change?
Technology is a difficult one. So if you are at a government school, and you don't have much cash, then you have to be innovative in other ways. If you're at a private school and you've got all the money in the world, great, you go for it. You've got technicians, you've got people that know how to operate things. So that removes a lot of barriers. Initially, it was just about changing the types of projects that students were doing. So we wanted to make sure that whatever project we put out in front of the students, we gave them lots of freedom within that. And that generally the products would be things that they would be interested in.
So do they go and find their own problem? Or
well, increasingly, so in junior year levels, you kind of set the problem and the context, and it's much more structured. But then just as the year levels increase, we strip that away.
Freedom happens.
Until we get to year 12, and they are completely finding everything on their own, understand the problem, and tackle it any way that they want. And we quickly came away from focusing just on materials. So this is a woodwork thing or a metalwork thing or plastics. So we're always focused on problems. What problems can we solve? And so the students have really enjoyed that. But with technologies are really just a tool. So you can do a lot of things with hand tools. Technologies make it easier.
It's a form of technology.
Laser cutting will make something a lot easier, but you can kind of get round things with lots of different little techniques. So technology is great. It can be engaging, maybe initially. Like when we brought in 3D printers, it was like, wow, that's fantastic. 6 months later, no one's interested really, and it's always about what is the work that the students are engaged in. What are they trying to do? Do they have freedom? Are they intrinsically motivated in the task? And that's where we've tried to place ourselves now. That we're very fortunate in Australia that the Australian curriculum for technologies, design and technologies, is quite progressive. And it'll talk about things like products, sure, but also services and environment. So we have, and through the teachers' associations, we have close links with the universities. So we went to RMIT and said, what is this service design thing? And how can we apply it in a high school setting? And so they were really helpful. And so within a couple of months, we developed a unit of work for year 8s where they develop an app and device something similar to the Fitbit.
Yeah.
So we identify something that someone really wants to achieve, or some problem that needs to be solved, and they'll develop a conceptual device, an app to go with that. And I think that's how we are managing to kind of not stay ahead of other schools, but that's how we are developing our learning area, by trying to find new and interesting ways to engage students.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I actually really enjoy the fact that you're reaching out to the tertiary level, and then those other areas through the Teachers Association to bring that knowledge into the high school. Now, when you give the students that problem to solve, before they start concepting, do they go through like the understanding and research and point of view phases? Yeah,
basically they're following the design thinking model. So they've got to empathize and basically just understand the area and think about the user.
Yeah.
And for young students, it's a difficulty for them to think about someone else's perspective.
Very much so. Yeah.
But that's good. That's work that they need to do.
Yeah.
That's been a big part of our approach, and when it comes to finding problems, the bigger the problem, the better.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas just now, what happens in a lot of schools, and I've done it myself in the past, it's just the older the students get, you just give them bigger and bigger products.
Yep.
But that's not necessarily the best way to go. So the bigger the problem, the better. And then the students can just find one angle or one way to address that issue. And whether that's with an app or a device or whatever, they seem to really take to it. Now, the app thing is a really interesting one, because we had to introduce ideas like information flowcharts and so kind of new visual language for them.
Yep.
And we were quite uncomfortable with that, because we didn't really understand it much ourselves.
Yep.
But the students got it.
Yeah.
And the students flew with it. And whenever you do those types of projects where you extend yourself and you think you might be extending the students maybe even too far sometimes, they often take it and run with it.
Yeah.
And they start teaching you.
Yeah.
And that's been our experience so far.
Do you think that's because they're exposed to a smartphone or a device or apps and that technology from a very young age? That's just what they know?
It's their world, and kids grow up in a completely different way to how we grew up.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think my son is being part raised by YouTube. So he adopts the accents of his favourite YouTubers.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a bit of a problem. But so there is a completely different environment. They are very kind of digital, and that world doesn't scare them at all. They're very comfortable with it. And I think we need to become more comfortable with it to ensure that we can engage them.
Yeah, that's great. And one of the things that actually I spoke about in my seminar just then was how virtual reality comes into this, because that's almost like the next thing after, like 3D printing, laser cutting was a thing, a few 5-10 years ago. Now it's kind of VR, AR, MR, that kind of thing. So one of the case studies that we found in the US, actually was I think in Toronto, where the class, they found that the top 10% of the mathematics class were the students who were engaging VR formulas and visualizing algebraic equations in virtual reality and being able to actually draw the graph versus saying x plus y equals z. They seem to understanding within 2-3 days of using it versus sometimes going on the whole semester or the term without understanding it. So do you think that VR, AR, that will die down, or do you think that'll become more of a embedded technology in our classrooms looking at the next 5 to 10, 20, 30 years?
I think it's inevitable that VR and AR will become more embedded in what we do, particularly in design and technology.
Yeah.
And it's exciting in some ways.
I think so.
Yeah, it's exciting that. So again, if you look at different schools and their resourcing levels, if you don't have all the best tools and equipment and materials and even assistance, then you are going to struggle. So VR could level the playing field. Everybody could be creating digitally, and then it could be 3D printing or just exporting videos or images from whatever they've created.
Yeah.
So I think that it will come. I don't think it will replace making. I don't think it will replace lots of the things that we do. I don't think it will replace artifacts. because those things are important to us.
Definitely.
Culturally.
Yeah.
And I think we're always going to want to have the thing. But if you look at Ford, for instance, now Ford have obviously stripped right back their engineering in Australia, but what they have kept is their design and development centre. And the virtual reality and AR is heavily used in that environment.
Yeah.
So they will test everything. The interior architecture of cars all has to be checked out in VR before they spend any money in making.
Yeah.
They can run focus groups with potential buyers, all in VR without wasting a lot of money. So it's opening up a lot of possibilities, and I think it will just be another great tool to have available. But I don't foresee us walking into a classroom and everyone's just sitting on a headset for the whole day. At least I hope not. But definitely a great tool.
No, definitely. It's interesting because the Ford example you gave, I actually recently found that Mercedes-Benz was using VR for their marketing. They were advertising their new AMG model, where someone can put the headset on and actually sit in the car and see it, and they can look around and they can almost touch and feel the heads-up display and everything like that, and you feel like you're in the car. So it's I think the applications are really incredible and what can happen. So it's exciting times definitely in the classrooms from that point of view. Looking at how this technology and like how the evolution of the design as a subject and how we teach, do you think this, how does this relate in your point of view to 21st century education and 21st century learning skills?
Well, the future of work is changing. Industry 4.0 and all of that stuff. And
that's something you mentioned at the conference.
And it's going to be a major thing. And it's not just blue-collar jobs that are going to change, it's white-collar jobs as well. So with that, there's a lot of challenges, there's a lot of opportunities. Another name for it is the gig economy. So that's quite scary in one way, that I don't think people can guarantee that they're going to be in kind of long-term permanent employment. I don't know how people are going to manage to get a mortgage in the future, but I'm sure things will adapt. So the gig economy is interesting. Now, for the gig economy to work, you have to be able to work off-site. You have to be able to communicate with people on the other side of the world. You have to work in teams virtually. And so this technology is going to assist that. And the more comfortable and familiar students are in that area, the better. So being able to talk to a manufacturer in America or China or wherever it might be in a virtual space and explore a product or a manufacturing issue or whatever it is, if it's designing technology, that's going to be incredibly useful. We had a speaker from Ford at the conference yesterday, and it's definitely one of the skills that they don't need people to have it just now, but they will. They will.
This is a little bit going off topic, but I've constantly read the fact that the fathers of these technologies, people like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, and experts that are in technology, something that they constantly said was they don't let their kids use this technology until they were more than 10 or 11 years old. Did you have any thoughts on that? Like, what do you think? How does that affect our classroom?
All right, so there's a couple of things in there. As a parent, I don't know how I would survive without the iPad. Like, this is a real thing. So, look, it is a bit of an issue. One of the worst things that happened in schools was that it happened at a great time for Apple. So they developed an entertainment device. That's what the iPad is. Anybody that's designing that product is thinking about how can people consume entertainment, how can they watch stuff, how can they play stuff. It's not for creation. Otherwise you would have designed it differently.
Do you think it's becoming more about creation now?
Well, I think so. It's evolving. Right? But at the time where schools were kind of looking for kids to have one-to-one devices and stuff like that, and what the
laptop or the iPad,
or even at that time it was still desktops. Should we have desktops around the walls in every classroom? And it was cheaper, and the battery life was great. And if you gave them a good case, it probably would last a year. I mean,
Yeah.
we're crazy that we just think about IT in that short term.
Yeah.
But that's what happened, and it's been an incredible distraction for students.
Yeah.
And they freely admit it. In fact, we just had the graduation ceremony for our year 12s a couple of months ago, and they were the first cohort to have the iPads in year 7.
Oh wow!
So this has been with them all the way throughout secondary school.
Yeah.
It's been very much a part of their schooling, and they're open about it as soon as the teacher's talking or doing something or somewhere else. Game.
Yeah.
You know, as soon as there's not much happening, it's a game. So I think also when it first came out, parents were moving kids from one school to another so that they would get an iPad.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, it really was kind of crazy, but. It did put IT in the kind of mass education, and I think we've learned the lessons, and now laptops are kind of where we need them to be, and kids are able to kind of create more with those types of devices. But I still come back to this point about if students are engaged in what they're doing, then they're not as easily distracted by this type of stuff. So if they're working collaboratively and they've got lots of choice about what they're doing, and they think, not that they think, but they're empowered to tackle big issues, they're into it.
Yeah.
You know, that's better than just sitting trying to get to the next level of the game. It's more fun for them, actually. And I just had an experience last week where I witnessed that. I had a week-long project with kids tackling United Nations sustainability goals using digital technologies.
Yep.
They could pick any goal they wanted. They could come up with any sort of solution they wanted.
Yep.
And they were into it. And I really didn't have to ask any students to put the iPad down and stop playing the game. They were using their devices, but they were using them for research or to make videos or to make a website or an app or something like that.
Yeah.
So can be a useful tool. The iPad thing was I don't think it was helpful.
Yeah.
And I think Apple took advantage of that market that they found.
Yeah.
So hopefully we're past that. But yeah, as a parent, way more complicated.
That's true. That's true. And I can't speak on personal experience there, but one of the things that I've actually noticed on that same topic was my 4th years at QUT. This is the architectural cohort, and when I went through, and it wasn't that long ago, I graduated in 2012, and we were using yellow trace or white trace paper and sketching, and just literally miles and miles of trace paper, especially when we're in the design phase. And more recently, like it's something that I really found in this last term was that more students are not bringing trace paper anymore. They're literally bringing a big iPad Pro, one of the latest ones, and they're bringing their Apple Pencil or a Surface Pro, and they're just sketching for unlimited pages. And I'm like, there's good things about it because you're saving so much paper at the same time. And on the other side of the coin, they're very dependent on that technology. If that loses, their entire design is gone. It's not, I don't know if it was backed up. I think some of them were, some of them weren't.
Yeah.
And just the way they work with the whole turning on and off layers rather than actually putting the trace paper on top of each other. I feel like a dinosaur talking about it. It's,
although it can go the other way. So if you've got that all the work in your physical portfolio,
that's the thing,
and you leave it on the tram. Yeah. Nightmare.
That's the thing. So I'm like, wow, it's a very interesting point, and I'm seeing that transition. And I swear, my 4th years there were more iPads than trace paper in this last semester. So it's very interesting to see where it's going. But I'm glad to hear that it's across the board. Do you actually, from your point of view as the DATTA Australia president, do you see that? Is this the same norm across Australia?
In terms of
the technology shift and what the impact that it's having in the classroom and how the teachers are tackling it, their viewpoints, fears.
Yeah, I think one of the things, as a teachers association, one of the things that we try to help our members with is that we try to introduce them to the new technologies at events like conferences or workshops where they've got time to sit with someone who knows what they're doing and can help them. Oftentimes it's just an introduction. But because teachers are so time poor, keeping up with the technology is really difficult.
It's almost like the next time they come to the PD, it's a different thing.
Yes. And if you take CAD, for instance, so when I started 10 years ago, the kind of obvious choice to use for CAD was SketchUp.
Yeah.
It was free. It would run on anything. It was pretty intuitive.
Pretty easy. Yeah.
Until you went to 3D print from it, then it was
That's
a different story. But then, so a colleague of mine joined the school a few years ago, and he said, "Well, look, most of the kids have got iPads. There's this program that we can use. It's browser based, so they can do it on the iPads. Like, okay, let's use that."
Yeah.
And so we learned how to use it one summer, and then we rolled that out. But then halfway through the year, something strange started happening. The kids stopped using the ones that we were telling them to use.
Right.
And someone else at the back of the class had learned how to use Fusion 360 or whatever.
Oh, wow.
And so then he's taught all the kids at his table how to use that.
Yeah.
But then over here, someone's got, I don't like Fusion 360. I'm going to use this.
Oh, wow.
And so I've now got a digital design class at year 10 where they must be using 4 or 5 different pieces of software. And I don't know. I only know one of them. But fortunately, the kind of obviously the stuff we've shown them initially is enough to get them across all of them.
So you just got them started and they started running with it?
Yeah, but Bailey even started, it was like, I'll show you 2 or 3 things to start drawing, and then you're going to play and experiment and explore.
Yeah.
And then after a bit of exploration, here's a simple thing that you can try and draw, a Lego brick or something like that.
Yeah.
And then we're going to go through a full design process, design thinking, solve a problem, come up with a product, and then you're going to model it. Yeah. And that was basically the digital design elective that we had. And they're all using different platforms, different software. It's weird, but it's great. It's fantastic, and they're teaching themselves because they're engaged. Yeah. And they're going home and they're playing with it, and they're chatting to their friends about it, and they're showing each other.
Yeah.
And that's, as an educator,
that's what you want.
That's the dream.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting. I'm just thinking back. That's what happened to me in first year at tertiary. Yeah. Because we were forced to learn all the softwares on our own, and I got my foot in the door with SketchUp. But in high school, we were taught almost redundant softwares like Pro Desktop. Mm-hmm. So we never used it, and no one uses it anymore. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of a waste of time in a way. But when we came into uni, there were couple of these really high-performing students that were using SketchUp for these very, very simple things, and we're still doing sketches, and it just can't even compare. So I remember thinking and feeling the same way, and then that forced us to then learn it ourselves, and then that then bridges onto Revit or then ArchiCAD or whatever, and then Photoshop, and you just go from there. So the fact that that's happening in year 10, that's incredible. They're going to be literally years ahead. So that's brilliant. Yeah. How do you, as a teacher, when it comes to all these changes and what's happening and the amount of information that you kind of just need to know a little bit at least, how do you make time, or what do you do to actually keep up with it?
Yeah, I mean, again, that's where the associations really come in. I mean, so the reason that I got involved with associations was that I landed in and it was a nice little school, Catholic boys' school in the centre of Melbourne, and there was a fantastic teacher there who taught me so much. Yeah, he taught me about how to relate with students and how to use all the different equipment and stuff like that. But he was nearing the end of his time teaching. Yeah. And I was going to have to kind of step up and kind of be head of faculty, and it was a bit daunting. So I was looking for help. Yeah. And the Teachers Association, DATTA Vic, they were running some stuff around CAD, and I saw there was a conference coming up, and so I went along, and so that's where I got help. Yeah. And ever since then, I've attended everything I could, and within a couple of years, they asked me to join the committee, and then the rest is kind of history. But if you don't have that space, if you don't have that support network, it's incredibly difficult. Yeah. So you can do it on your own. Maybe not if you've got a family though, or a life outside of teaching. Yeah. Because this job isn't getting any easier. Yeah. Teaching's getting harder and harder, and we're getting more and more time poor. Yeah. So get support where you can. Teachers Associations is one great place to do it. Of course, there's lots of stuff online as well. But I think the other thing is trusting the students. Just giving them the opportunity to show you what they can do. Yeah. Setting a task that's maybe too difficult, and just seeing if they can rise to the challenge. And it's amazing. I was just talking to another colleague of mine there about robotics. Both of us are not very confident in that space. Both of us have a robotics class next year, and you know, we'll play with some stuff during the holidays, and we'll maybe chat to some of the traders and maybe get them to show us some stuff, that type of thing. But largely, what we'll do is we'll buy a load of stuff. We'll get in there with the students and we'll play.
With them.
With them.
Yeah.
And then we'll set a task and we'll see if they can do it. And they'll probably teach us way more than we can teach them. All we are doing is providing them the opportunity and the resources.
That's exactly right. That's what happened at the first day on the conference, actually. We had 2 headsets going on, and we were just playing with a couple of Oculus Go headsets. And the dad, I think he was in a maybe early 40s, and then the kid he had just finished grade 5. So they both put the headsets on at the same time. They've both never used it before. And it was kind of interesting to watch what was happening, because we gave them the handsets at almost the same time. And the dad kept asking, so what's this button? What's this button? What's this button? And the kid didn't ask a single question. He just took it and naturally started to move around. And we kind of stepped back. My whole team just stepped back, because these guys were having their own conversation. And the dad's asking questions, going, so what do I do now? Like, I'm seeing this. What's happening here? Where he's like, Dad, go there. Like, point at this, while he's in his own virtual reality environment and he's doing his own thing. And he just ran away with it. And he was on it for much longer. The dad got overwhelmed and he took the helmet off after a few minutes. But it's really interesting to see that.
It's amazing. We have a PlayStation at my house.
Is there a PlayStation VR?
No,
okay,
not yet. I can't afford that yet.
Fair enough.
But I didn't have one as a child, so now I got a little bit of cash. I got one. And so I'm very happy about that. And my son, he's only just started using it for some games, and we're just slowly introducing that.
I should have asked before. How old is your son?
He's 8.
He's 8. All right.
He's an interesting 8-year-old. So he's very keen to get into it. It's probably a mistake, to be honest. But anyway, here we are. And but he just gets it. I have to go, how do you do this? Where do you go? He's, Dad, stop bothering me. He's way past me. So they're just completely comfortable with that, and they're not afraid of exploration and failure. They're not afraid of failure, and it's what those games are all about. It's about failing and failing and failing and failing and failing until you get to the next thing. So there's a level of grit and determination in there that's kind of natural to kids. And I think we teach it out of them. I think we teach them that failure is bad. And I think it's to do with the way we assess, and I think it's to do with the culture in schools and parent expectations, because when they were growing up, however you did at school set you for life. And that's not the case anymore. And I think we need to get back to that, encouraging kids to play, to be experimental, to embrace failure. If you're failing, you're learning. So I think that's and for our learning area, that's vital, and we kind of get that, but schools don't. Not in the whole. So that's another challenge that we're kind of facing.
I find it really interesting because with my own background, having gone to school in Sri Lanka, where at the end of every term we get a report card, and with our grades we have a position, a class position. So basically we know who's number 1 versus we know who's last, and everyone sits at that point. The grades are almost irrelevant as long as your position's good. So all the kids always go for I need to be number 1, I need to be number 1 or number 2. And when they don't, they feel like a failure. And then you subconsciously actually resent your friends who become higher. And I don't even want to think how the last student feels.
You just stop trying, you switch off.
I remember luckily I was always kind of in the 1 to, I shouldn't say 1, actually, that only happened once. Probably 2, 3 to about 10. I was kind of somewhere in between that. But one semester, something went wrong. I actually got 17. And I remember looking at that report card and I'm like, how am I going to take this to my parents? I'm the worst failure in the world right now. And it's literally because of that number. If it was just the grades, we can address those problems initially. But then that's when we came to Australia, we understood that Australia is actually very lucky, and there's so much capabilities here that other countries don't have, and we have a really caring bunch of teachers as well.
Although we have this kind of ATAR system as well, which is pretty much what you're talking about back home, where these kids are ranked, and there's so much pressure put on them to achieve that number that will then set them on the path for the rest of their life, which we know is not true. I mean, there's so many different pathways.
Exactly.
One of my big things is about students enjoying their education, because if they're having fun and they like learning, then they'll keep doing it.
Yeah.
But if we burn them through this machine that we've created, then they won't. And when they're older and they need to retrain, because this is what the future of work is going to be, people retraining constantly and having to upskill and learn new technologies and new things.
Yeah.
If they've had such a bad experience at a young age, that's a barrier that they might not be able to get through. And so that's our fault that we've done that. And we really need to kind of change the way that we do things so that students are more resilient in their own lives, in their own careers.
Yeah.
And they're comfortable with failure, and they're comfortable with scrapping the way they used to do things and doing things in a new way.
Yeah.
We really have a lot of work to do there beyond this learning area.
That's beautiful. I think that's all the time we have right now as well, and I think you just perfectly summed it up in that last paragraph there. So thank you so much for chatting with me, and I'm sure the listeners are going to have a great time listening to this conversation, especially with our accents as well.
Yeah, good luck with that. Apologies. Thanks for having me, Roshan, and good luck with the podcast.
Thank you. My pleasure, mate. Thank you.